Michael Keaton's devious poltergeist still has plenty of juice left in this madcap return to form for Tim Burton, marrying charming practical effects and ghoulish gags to provide a fun time. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, don't say it three times. The new film comes roaring back in theaters. That's our featured review this week here on Cinephile. There's a bunch of movies we have to do here. Also, Didi, which is a charming indie film, which I want to squeeze in here as a late summer treat. Wise Guy, which is all about the making of the Sopranos. Sit-down interview documentary Alex Gibney did with David Chase. And as far as our old movies are concerned, 25th anniversary of Being John Malkovich, Barney's version, one of Paul Giamatti's best movies, and Black Narcissus, the Powell and Pressburger film currently on Criterion. Also, Harry's got a little something on Paris, Texas, the Wim Wenders movie. And our wild card, big-time guest today, man. I believe he's at 27, maybe he's 28. 28-time Emmy Award winner Bob Costas is going to join us, so this is going to be awesome. Talking about Bob's history in movies as well as his friendship with Billy Crystal. All that more is coming up. Is going to be awesome. Please go to Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe, rate, and review. I've not seen any reviews in August. Please help me out. Go there. Give us a full 5-star review. Tell us what you like about the podcast. Talk to me about Iron Eagle. Longest ever Cinephile guest, 52 minutes. Could not have been more gracious with his time. Longest Cinephile episode last week, 100 minutes. Actually, I did see a review. Someone said your episodes are going too long. Sorry about that. Well, we're bi-weekly now, so we do go longer. So that's how we're doing it. But we're rocking and rolling. And before we get to the movies, good news for Harry and the Metal Arc team. You're going to be on the road now, involving yourself in college football coverage. You and Lucy heading to Wisconsin this weekend. How exciting is that going to be?
It's amazing. This is my first time getting to travel across the country and on somebody else's dime, which is, I will take it. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Make sure you get that per diem. That's the most important thing.
Right.
So, of course, look forward to that coverage coming down here on the Metal Arc family of networks. I got to first give a shout out, of course, to my boy RT, one of my dear college friends. The Toronto Film Festival is going on right now, and his debut movie, he's 48 years of age. He's been working as a director for 25 years. We graduated in 2000. And it's his first movie, and he financed it through Telefilm in Canada and through various sponsors, etc. But it stars Danielle Deadwyler, who was Golden Globe nominated for Till, which was on Netflix, actually, an excellent film. She probably should have got an Oscar nomination, just missed out. And it premiered this past Friday at TIFF. So, my buddies, obviously, from my Ryerson days, my college with Jay Nats and Hoosh and Cabby, we got to go. I said, all right, I'm in. So shout out to Porter Airlines here in New Jersey. I've never flown Porter before. Hour and a half, Jersey to Toronto. I took an early flight Friday morning, went and hung out with my parents for a little bit, saw my cousins, saw his baby, took the subway down, and I got to attend a film festival premiere with one of my good friends directing the movie, which was awesome. So 40 Acres is the movie. I hope it gets a massive distribution deal. I hope it's going to be great, and it's excellent. As I told Randall after the movie, because he's hobnobbing and we got a little after party, and I said, it's an excellent genre film because it's about this dystopian thriller. There's one, family alive still in Sudbury, Ontario. And by the way, normally they have Canada pretending to be New York or Chicago. Here they actually say Northern Ontario, which I appreciate. But he said there's one family in Northern Ontario, and then you got these cannibals coming. And so I said, listen, the young males will be satiated by the violence and gore and heads being blown off and cannibals eating people. But you've also got Danielle Deadwyler, who's an excellent actress, and you got this beautiful mother and son story, and it's beautifully shot. And then Randall goes, the other movie she's got coming out. I'm like, that's right. The Piano Lesson, which is another August Wilson adaptation. August Wilson wrote Fences. Viola Davis won the Oscar. Denzel starred in it. But this one's coming out this year. I think it's also on Netflix. And Samuel L. Jackson's getting a lot of Oscar buzz for supporting actor and Deadwyler for supporting actress. So I said, this is a perfect storm. This movie's going to come out, get Oscar buzz. What else has she done? Oh, she made this Canadian movie called 40 Acres, which is awesome. Boom. There you go. So very proud of Randall. And again, I'll keep you abreast of when 40 Acres gets a distribution deal. But it was very, very cool to be able to go back for 30 hours and back to the film festival. Not seeing any celebrities. I wasn't hobnobbing with Demi Moore. 60 still looking good. But speaking of looking good, let's get to Beetlejuice. I think the industry estimates had it at maybe $75 million opening, $110 million opening. People love their nostalgia. Wow. Superheroes and sequels. And I wouldn't call Beetlejuice a superhero, but it's certainly a sequel. I was very skeptical going in. I said, this is obviously a cash grab. Tim Burton hasn't made a good movie in 20 years. I don't think he's made a good movie since Big Fish. His best films, and I got a handful of them, Batman, the very underrated Batman Returns, Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice. I'd also throw in Ed Wood, which I'll review next week here on Cinephile. Excellent film. That's a 30th anniversary. That came out in 94. And actually, Burton's always said that's his favorite of his movies. Certainly his most personal. But that's a long time. Okay, we're talking 80s and 90s here since Tim's really been bringing the hammer. Scott Van Pelt, a big fan of Big Fish. I think that was 03. Been a long time. So I said, all right, you need some money. Sequel to Beetlejuice, which is a beloved film, which I love as much as anybody. That's what we got. And the good news is this. The best part of the new movie is the originals who are still involved. Michael Keaton is fantastic as Beetlejuice. Of course, one of my favorite actors. He's so funny. He said he had to go back and watch the movie again because he goes, I had to get the rhythm of it, the voice, all the characters and stuff. And there's enough callbacks to the original. You're going to get the nostalgia without overdoing it. Like particularly Keaton, there's at least 3 or 4 jokes. I'm like, yeah, that's a reference to the original Beetlejuice. Yeah, what do you think of this? Boom. But at least there's some new jokes and new one-liners, and he's still pretty spry for a guy in his 70s. He still looks like he's pretty good for a guy playing the undead. Catherine O'Hara, always very funny. She's welcome as Lydia. If you don't recall, Jeffrey Jones played her husband. Harry might do a quick Google search on this for me so both of our phones don't get confiscated. But I'm pretty sure he got arrested or charged with child pornography or something unsavory. So I knew for the Beetlejuice sequel, I'm like, all right, we're going to get Keaton. We're going to get Catherine O'Hara. Jeffrey Jones is not going to be in this movie. So suffice to say, he's not in the film. They deal with his absence with his should. Winona Ryder, of course, fantastic as Lydia. She looks as sparkling as ever and still has that morbid exterior to her. So the good news is you got the original cast doing the original things. It has that wonderful sense of the macabre. It's funny. It's irreverent. Certainly gory. There's a couple moments I was like, ooh, they're really earning this PG-13 and a handful of obscenities. My son Adine, who is 13, who just watched the original, I asked him afterwards for his pithy review. He said, I thought it was strange and weird. And I think I liked the first one better. And I said, I'm with you, buddy. But this morning on the way to school, I asked him again. He goes, no, I did like it. I said, okay, so you liked the movie? He goes, no, I liked it. It was strange and weird. I said, yeah, it was kind of bloody and gory, and a little spooky. He's like, yeah. The stuff I didn't like with the new film is, of course, the newer stuff. Jenna Ortega, who looks like she'd be a character in a Tim Burton movie, but I just didn't find that subplot particularly interesting. Like most sequels, it gets very busy. They just keep piling on. Thankfully, it wasn't too long. It was an hour and 42 minutes. But definitely some overkill in moments. But again, Keaton is fantastic. He's always worth the price of admission. And I should mention the heart-stopping, breathtakingly beautiful Monica Bellucci. Every scene she's in, clearly you have my attention. Tim Burton is winning at life, okay? He's dating Monica Bellucci, and his movie just made $110 million. It's a good time to be Tim Burton. So go check out the film. I'll give it 3 Maple Leafs. I enjoyed it. It was actually better than I expected it to be. And Harry can now give clarification. What was Jeffrey Jones charged with? Have you been able to find this?
It was child porn, and he was not asked to be in the second one.
The gang's back together again, minus Jeffrey. We don't want to have a guy involved with kiddie porn. He's not going to be in this one. Okay, fair enough. Moving on. Didi, I'm going to do quickly because I got more stuff to do here on Wise Guy. Didi's an excellent independent film. Shout out to my friend Claire Atkins and her friend Candace, who's a film critic. And I said, it's been kind of a bleak year. What do we got? And she goes, well, Candace said her favorite movie of the year so far is Didi. I said, okay, I'm in. So I go to my local independent movie theater here in New Jersey and go check it out. Here's the story. In 2008, during the last month of summer before high school begins, an impressionable 13-year-old Taiwanese American boy learns what his family can't teach him: how to skate, how to flirt, and how to love your mom. This one's right up Harry's alley because it's in Fremont, California. And I know the area because my wife's from San Jose. Harry, for those that don't know, is from San Francisco. And it's a really good time capsule because it makes you think about 2008. Again, Harry's younger than me, so he'll relate even more to this movie. This is when you're first using, I am Messenger to contact people. This is when you're first using Facebook. This is first really using technology as a 13-year-old kid to keep in touch with your friends. And I thought the movie did a really smart job of doing that. Like, without divulging too much, he's got a crush on a girl, obviously, that's going to happen. It's a coming of age movie. And it's like, she's like, are you mad at me? Is it okay? And the way the camera's just watching, like the blinking letters, and it's like, do I write something down? Do I write that I'm busy? Do I put emojis? Like, I was like, oh my God, like every 13-year-old kid in 2008 could relate to this story and certainly relate to it now. But there's one thing about coming of age stories is, particularly with Sean Wang's film, he's the director, I think the more specific you make it, the more universal it becomes. So I'm not Taiwanese American, but I can certainly appreciate the importance of family in this movie and the relationship he has to his grandmother, his mother, and his sister, and his sister. Like, man, they go at it. Phew. Oh, I can imagine the amount of profanity and fierce feelings that these siblings have. But I guess when you're going at it like this, you are. When you're 13 years old and you have an older sister and you do weird stuff, and I don't really want to get into it. There's some nasty stuff in here. Maybe it was clearly based on some of Sean's personal experiences. Joan Chen is fantastic as the mother. If you're wondering where the dad is in this movie, he's working overseas. He's making money for the family, and that's why it's basically a single mom raising this entire family. And there's definitely contentious moments, but there's also humorous moments. And like any 13-year-old, you have your group of friends, and then you have a different group of friends. And that group of friends, you kind of just drift away. The film did a really good job of explaining that you don't really have a breakup with your friends. It's just, sometimes you just drift apart. And also these skateboarding guys are pretty cool. And hey, you're a filmmaker. You can like record us doing skateboarding stuff. Can you put that on YouTube? Like, oh, cool. And all of a sudden that's how you make your coolness. And especially the stuff with talking to girls. I mean, it was there's one line where the girl says to him, "You are cute for an Asian." And I remember reading the audience review. So when I was 13, someone said that. I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely something that I've heard people say when I've been Asian. Oh, you're cute for an Asian. And at one point, it does really well with the self-loathing aspect of being Asian. Because at one point, his friends are like, oh, you're Asian. He's like, no, I'm half Asian. And
Mm.
later on, when they meet his mom, they're like, oh, so like, is your husband white? And she was like, excuse me? And he's like, shut up, guys, no, no. She's like, is your husband white? She's like, no, my husband's like, he's Taiwanese. And like, and after he's like, no, no, dude, my mom's so stupid. She sucks. And I'm like, dude, like, why are you so mean to your mom? Like, what, like, are you lying? Like, why would you lie about being half Asian? Like, just say you're Asian. Again, it's about a kid trying to understand his life, his world, the people around him. And I really enjoyed it. As at times, it was a little sad and a little bleak. And like I said, the way he talks to his mom, whoo, I got some problems with this kid. But he's a terrific actor in the film because he really, again, conveys the teenage angst and frustration at that age. Isaac Wang is the kid who plays him. And it's a good film. I hope that people will check it out. Once again, it's called Didi. All right. I'll give it 3.5 Maple Leafs. Wise guy. Now, this is why I can never believe, I love all of you, but I can never believe those of you who like to message me on Twitter and IG and give me your movie reviews. Because when I first saw the trailer for this, I had no idea this was coming out. And someone goes, dude, temper your expectations. I saw this at Tribeca Film Festival, and it's just David Chase talking. And like, it's not that good. He's not a very interesting guy. And I go, oh my God. So now I really got to pump the brakes here. Here's my David Chase story. And Harry's seen the first part. It's a 2-part documentary, 2.5 hours in total. Death of a Salesman, one of the all-time great plays. Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of my all-time favorite great actors. I take me and my wife to go see it. I'll never do this again. My wife and I sat in the last row because, whatever. I'm like, I wasn't making that much money. I'm living in Connecticut here, ESPN, grinding it out. I'm like, okay, it's like $80 tickets. I'm like, whew. Okay, 80 times 2, 160, parking's 50, babysitting's another 100. I'm like, oh my God, this is like a $300 event. Okay, fine. We were in the last row. She fell asleep. I'm like, this is awful. Like, how could you fall asleep? Philip Seymour Hoffman bellowing his heart out as Willie Loman. And I look over and she's falling asleep. I go, never again. If I take her, we got to go front row and I'll just take out another mortgage. Anyways, on the way out, incredible performance. I see David Chase. I'm freaking out. She has no idea. I'm like, that's David Chase. I'm like, this guy great Sopranos. And I go up to it, and almost every time I met a celebrity, when I met Michael Keaton, he couldn't have been nicer. He knew who I was. He was like, oh, we started talking Pittsburgh sports, Pirates, Penguins, Steelers. David Chase, cold. I go up, like, hey, Mr. Chase, how are you? He's like, hi. And I'm like, oh, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of Sopranos. Like, thanks. And I go, what do you think of the play? He goes, great. And then I got one more. I go, what are you working on right now? He goes, movie. I'm like, okay, that's it. We're not gonna continue this conversation with David Chase any further. So I was very worried going in. And again, I don't want to blast the guy who messaged me, but you're wrong. This is fantastic. Are you kidding? I would have taken a 10-hour documentary. David Chase is dour and sullen, but he's also smart and he's perceptive and he's insightful and he's funny. And he made the greatest show of all time. I love this. Wise guy, David Chase and the Sopranos. You got to go check it out. It is primarily Alex Gibney, the director, sitting there with David Chase, just as they mirror Dr. Melfi and Tony sitting in the therapist's office going back and forth. But I found it riveting. And I thought it could have been a lot longer, which is something I don't often say. But what I like the way that Gibney did it is it's stylish. Again, he's a great director. He made the film Going Clear, the case against Scientology, which is why I hate Tom Cruise, which is an outstanding HBO documentary. He did a great doc on Sinatra, one of my favorites, All or Nothing at All. So I like the way that he shot it. He obviously has the opening of The Sopranos and kind of intercut certain things of New Jersey, but there's so many interesting details. One of which I found fascinating is that Martin Scorsese, who I adore like no other, didn't like it. And David Chase said that. He goes, yeah, Marty Scorsese didn't like it because he goes, I couldn't relate to it. And I looked up an article on it, and Marty had said in an interview in 2019, around when The Irishman came out, he goes, yeah, I guess I watched one episode. I couldn't get into it because I couldn't relate to it. Because and David Chase is right. He goes, mob movies were always set in Manhattan, maybe Brooklyn, The Godfather, Goodfellas, etc. Because this was in New Jersey, woods, nature, deer, big houses. So Marty couldn't relate to it, which, listen, I adore Marty, but you're missing out, man. You got to go watch 86 episodes of the greatest show ever. But that was a big, of the many tidbits that I gleaned, Harry, that was something interesting to me that Martin Scorsese did not like The Sopranos. Or didn't watch it.
Yeah, that part was surprising, especially because Chase is such a cinephile in his own right. Like yes. Scorsese, there was so much of homages to other films. That was probably the moment where I was like, okay, I am in, is the scene of cross-cutting that first Tony Chase scene with the Chinatown stuff.
Yes, that was awesome.
I was just like, that is so awesome. Cool. And it really was. You could see Chase just get inspired in real time and bring his own flavor to it. It was really that part was really awesome.
You're right. That was awesome. They did a really good job of cross-fitting that. There's this scene where Jake Gittes, Nicholson's character, is chasing. So that early, I think it's the first episode of Sopranos, actually.
Yeah.
But he's like driving across trying to kill that guy down. You're right. That was awesome that they shot that. And that's one of the things about Chase is he himself, was always a TV guy, Emmy Award winner, but always felt like a failure because he was such a cinephile and always wanted to make movies. And then he gets stuck in the Sopranos and goes, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to get this movie. Although he says at one point, his agent said, like, you are now a brand after the first two seasons. Like, you can go make that movie. And he thought, like, I can just quit the Sopranos, but he couldn't because he loved doing it, was passionate about it. I wish they talked to the Many Saints of Newark, which was not received well. And I think most people feel like it's just Chase finally wanted to make a movie and he made it, but it wasn't anywhere near as good as The Sopranos and certainly missed Jim's influence. I think even the most apologetic Sopranos fan would say the Many Saints of Newark at best was decent. And there'd be a lot more harsher reviews of people who hated it and said, well, this isn't even close to what the actual show was. But it's hard. You don't have, Adriana, you don't have Christopher, et cetera. It's a whole different cast. But anyways, as far as the show itself, what I thought the documentary did an amazing job of was just showing how influential that show was and having an anti-hero like Tony and Chris Albrecht, who's obviously a very smart executive of HBO, like their concerns about the show, that very famous scene in college when he murders the Fink, the rat. And he goes, you're going to lose the audience. People are not going to cheer for this guy. But Chase was so uncompromising and so sticking to his vision. And then it was really smart how they were able to do that. I think they also made a good point how at times they weren't sure if it was a comedy or a drama. I think Stevie Van Zandt says that. It was incredibly bleak, but it was also hysterically funny. I mean, there's like laugh out loud moments on the show where you're just losing your mind how funny it is, and particularly Tony. In part two, which I know Harry's and God, just I won't say too much, but they talk more about Gandolfini specifically. And of course, listen, he's the front runner. He was a complicated guy. There's no question about it. But I think at the same time, he was somebody who was very generous. He was somebody that the entire crew appreciated. Now stories have come out more that he was really dealing with a lot of substance abuse issues. And at times he complained that it was the rule's fault, that it was, the stuff that he was asked to do, that was what the challenge was. But ultimately, I think that, and Chase makes this point, he goes, I think Jim had his own issues. Maybe the role exacerbated it, but whatever issues he had with substance abuse or drugs, like it was going to come out anyways. But there's no doubt it was going to be more of a challenge because of the fact he's doing this role where he's got to be so angry and difficult. And they really did a good job of explaining the hours. They go, so if you start shooting at 7 a.m., he goes, you could go till, 9 p.m., then you need a 12-hour turnaround. So then the next day, the actors of the union is you'd go at 9 a.m. the next day. But then you could go until 9 p.m., then again 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. And then Fridays, you could go as late as you want. So he goes, you were really, and Gandolfini is like, you do 12 hours on set and then go home and then have to learn the lines for the next day. There's 8.5 pages you got to learn. So it was an exhausting schedule. And he would do certain things to make himself, like if Tony had an angry scene, he'd put himself into that character. He'd put rocks in his shoes. You see him tell that story inside the actor's suite. He had pebbles in his shoes. He goes, trust me, there's a pointed pebble. You're in a bad mood. He goes, lack of sleep, 2-3 hours sleep. I'd force myself. I'd be pissed. And they, again, great montage, but give me showing all the scenes of Tony just losing it. You're beating up Ralphie, just grabbing Carmela, fighting with Annabelle Sciorra, Gloria, like the intent of this guy was amazing. And I really think the documentary showed just how tough the show was, how gritty it was. And again, that word again, uncompromising. They showed violence against women when Ralphie kills the stripper. And as David Chase said, like he goes, you can't fall in love with these guys. Like I had to remind them, like these guys are mobs. These are bad people. These are bad hombres, to use a Breaking Bad expression. And Chase said there was very much two camps. There's the people who loved the show and the elements of fantasy and the family drama and all that shit. And then the rest of the crowd was just like the gangster fans. They just want to see, Frank Vincent as Phil Leotardo, wiping out guys. So he goes, it was interesting. The fans were either, it was just mob people or people who really loved the drama and the balance of it, et cetera. But it's great stories, man. Imperioli, I love. He was always my favorite character. Him as Christopher is so good. A character I can relate to, obviously. Mobster who loves movies. But he tells some good stories about him writing scripts and wanting to be involved with it and relationship with Jim. But Gandolfini definitely comes across as a complicated guy, but very generous. He got a big raise from HBO. He gave each of the cast members $30,000 just to be out of the kindness of his heart, say thank you to them. I think he felt guilty in some ways. I'm making the most money. You guys get some too. This isn't $300. $30,000 you give to 10 cast members. That's 300 grand. So it shows the kind of person he was and his generosity. But again, incredible show. And Harry, again, you're younger than me. So this show was coming out. You weren't even, I'm going to say you were in diapers, but you were a young man. So you watched this show, I'm guessing, after The Sopranos had already aired, or did you watch some of it in real time?
Oh, yeah. Way later. When I was in my 20s, so probably 2016, 17,
Yeah. So
but
10 years after, yeah.
10 years after. Yeah. I mean, I was like 10 or 11 when the show came out. barely
Yeah.
even knew about it. My parents loved it, but it it is still, I think, on the first episode of Cinephile, I said I shoehorned it in as one of my favorite movies because it's
Yeah.
just
That's
it
right.
has meant so much to me as a like piece of work. And uh, my originally watching when I 5 minutes into the documentary, I was a little skeptical because I was like, I didn't love the like I bet the heavy-handed like, oh, the documentarian is Melfi and they're doing this therapy
Yes.
session. But once I just got into the world of learning about The Sopranos, every single detail was like catnip for me. I just
Yeah.
could not get enough of hearing about the artistic process and the machinations and the actors cast that didn't end up getting into it, and seeing
Yeah,
like
that
Van
was great. The
Zandt for
montage of
Tony.
different actors like auditioning for Tony or auditioning for Christopher, like, that was fantastic. You don't even know who these guys are, but it was fantastic seeing them doing the same line, but 8 different actors doing it.
There's that great moment of the reason the woman who played Adriana, why she got it was just because she didn't say ow, she was like ow, and
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that was like Chase was like
Yeah, the way it was written was OWWW. So they say, "Ouch." She was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "She knows how to do it like a real Brooklyn actor, right?" And even Chase, I mean, Imperioli talks about doing the audition. He didn't think he did well, and he's laughing. He's like, "Well, who is this guy, David Chase? He's not even
right.
Italian. Who is this guy?"
That part was great. The other part that is, when you watch The Sopranos in its whole, you forget that season one is so much about a guy and his mom,
Yeah,
and how much of Chase's mom was this idiosyncratic figure in his life, and everything sort of seemed to come from that. Hearing him put that into film was very interesting and kind of a fun way to build a universe around that. Like he had his mom, who seemed to be
yeah,
based uh the mom in The Sopranos is based seemingly on his mom, but then everything else
correct.
is fictional.
Yeah, and you're right. It's funny. I've had people tell me, they go, "I love The Sopranos except for the therapy scenes." I'm like, that's the show. Like, I don't know how you
Right.
could separate one from the other. It kind of goes to Chase's point. People, they just like the mob stuff and they don't like the other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but that's what made the show unique. It's about a suburban dad who deals with all the issues that you would expect with his daughter and his son and his wife and his infidelity. But he also happens to be a guy who runs the mafia. But he has these panic attacks, which is why he has to go, because he can't risk the chance that his mobsters see what's happening to him. So therefore, he has to go to therapy. And that's what really was so smart about the show. I think the New York Times said that. They said that's why it's a great show of all time, because it hit on like two of the most important aspects of the 20th century, late 20th century life, which is fascination with the mafia and crime and psychotherapy. He's like, so it was amazing the way he was able to meld those two together. And you're right, some of it's based on Chase's own moments in therapy, but you're right. The mom is absolutely based on his mom, which is a hell of a statement, because I mean, she's
Yeah.
incredible in the show, but I couldn't imagine living with Livia Soprano. Um,
No.
just insane that the way she's so withering. And then I'm with you. The writers room stuff was great when they had like I think Robin Green and Terrence Winter is great, because Terry Winter's talking about the fact he never had any support from his family. He's like he goes, listen, my dad dropped dead on a Monday. My mom went back to work on Thursday to support 5 kids. So she was a hard worker, but we did not have a good relationship. He's like, I remember when I told her I got into NYU, and she was like, another one of your harebrained schemes. Because then when I told her I got into law school, she's like, I gave you 6 months.
Oh my god.
Just a terrible. So he goes, a lot of this stuff would come into the show. Like David would hear these stories about a relationship with our parents and negative things. Like, all right, we'll get them in the show. Frank Renzulli, who's a buddy of my buddy, Michael Lombardi. Of course, we did the GM Shuffle together. Mike knows Renzulli. I don't know how they know each other, but he was always like, oh, Renzulli's the best. And Frank's in the show. And he only was on, I didn't realize he was only on the first couple seasons. But he said Chase, like as brilliant as he was, sometimes he could be the funniest guy in the room, but sometimes he was just a huge prick and he was difficult and whatever. And he goes, I didn't last. So I don't know if Frank left the show or Chase got rid of him, but Robin, one of the writers, she says that Chase fired her. They had a falling out. So he
Jeez.
doesn't sound like an easy guy to work with. And like I said, long hours, dour, dark, depressing, violent, but incredible show. And certainly they had their moments as well. And Andrea Di Matteo, by the way, who plays Adriana, did mention with regards to Jim. So everyone talks about Gandolfini's partying and the fact that he was, listen, we were all effed up. Okay. We were all getting after. We were the biggest thing on TV. Are you kidding me?
Right.
We're all going nuts. He wasn't the only one, but I think it was hard for him, as Imperioli says, because like, he just wanted to walk around wearing like Green Day shirts and AC/DC shirts. And he goes, James Gandolfini was not blending in the crowd. So if he went out for dinner, ever knew who he was.
Right.
And I think it was hard for him that everyone thought he was Tony Soprano, which he clearly was not. He's like an actor he was maybe there was elements of Tony within him, just as with any actor. But he goes, dude, he's just like a rock and roll guy from Jersey who loves acting and proud that he went to Rutgers, and he's not a mob boss. He just wanted to go out for dinner. But everyone always identified him as Tony Soprano, and the way he was able to nail the role is it's part of the tragedy of losing him at 51. The second part, again, you'll see they have some of the funeral, and Chase giving a speech there is really good, and of course the ending, which I will not give away, but Chase talks about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so part two, make sure you check out part two. They talk about the ending specifically, what were you aiming for, Chase's thoughts on it, the other cast. I'll just give one tidbit. Gandolfini, Lorraine Bracco, who's great, she's telling the story that she goes, I was watching it with Jim, and she goes, when it cut to black, he was like, that's it? Like, what? Like, are you kidding? Like, just like all of us, the guy who played him for 86 episodes, like that. And he goes, was he mad? He wasn't mad. He was just in shock. He was just like befuddled. He's like, that, like what? Like even he didn't know what happened. So like that, it's amazing that Chase kept everybody in the dark with this open-ended ending. And I'll just give my opinion on the ending because at the time I hated it. At the time I said, I want to cop out. I said, God, I wasted all this time and you do that crap, open-ended ending. And now I think it's beyond brilliant because we're talking about it for 20 years. Like, of course it was a great ending. Like, right, Harry? Look, think how gutsy an ending that was.
Well, as I binged it, right? So I watched it in maybe a 6-month period, and I think there was something about that made the ending really work for me. Maybe because I hadn't built up, 7 years of investment for it, so I just was able to a little bit more appreciate it as like the button to a show. And so I loved it. I thought same thing. How could you tie a neat knot on the end of such a complicated and digressive and strange show? Like, that's the only way to end it.
Digressive is a great word by you to describe the show because you're right. They talk about the dream sequences. Like, you forget the test dream episode's crazy. The way they work in dreams in this show, like, it was really, I'm telling you, man, it's a monumental achievement. I know people maybe who are not Sopranos fans, like, man, you guys make it sound like it cured cancer, but I'm telling you, it's life-changing. That's how great the show was. Think about it. Harry put it as one of the greatest movies of all time. It's not even a movie, but it feels like it's 86 hours of movie. It's so dense and overwrought and just brilliant and so passionate. It's honestly something you should all see. So if you haven't seen The Sopranos, go ahead.
Oh, well, just the last thing about The Sopranos too that I always think with. First time I watched it, it's a drama. Every other time I've watched it, it's the funniest show I've ever seen. It is so. And there was one scene in the documentary where they showed that, and this happens when I watch The Sopranos, is another line will hit me and I will be like, that is so funny. And the one that I was thinking about with this one is they show that scene where Tony is telling Carmela that he is on Prozac, and she's like, he's like, you're looking at me like I'm Hannibal Lecter or something.
That's right.
I'm calling Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal
they showed
Lecter.
The one clip too is great with the orange juice. He's like,
oh, I mean, amazing. Yeah.
This is lots of pulp. I like some pulp.
Yeah.
Throws the phone at him. I'm like that. I think that was replicated across many dining rooms and kitchens across America in the late 90s, early 2000s. Lots of pulp, some pulp, or no pulp when it comes to Tropicana orange juice. Again, Wise Guy, make sure you check it out. All about David Chase and The Sopranos. It's absolutely brilliant. All right, so those are the new movies. Again, Beetlejuice, the headliner. Now time for our very special guest. So I'm on MLB Now. I'm playing the role of analyst with Brian Kenny, which is always a bit of a challenge when you're a host playing the analyst, but it can work. And Brian Kenny's talking about starting pitchers and saying they're a relic of the past. And I laughed. I said, like Kirk Douglas and Spartacus. And he kind of brushed me off and he keeps going on his topic. And later on, Bob Costas joins the show and Bob's answering Brian's questions. And just as Brian's letting Bob go, he goes, hey, by the way, Adnan, nice Spartacus reference, very, very current. And I go, hey, all right, hey, Bob Costas is listening. All right, great. And then maybe a month later, I'm on once again MLB Now. And this time, Brian Kenny's talking about the 69 Mets. And I said, geez, Brian Kenny knows a lot more about baseball than me and Joel Sherman. So I said, well, let me approach it the way I would, which is that in Men in Black 3, there's a character named Don Clendenin. He's of the 69 Mets, and Barry Sonnenfeld, the director, loves the 69 Mets, etc. So I dropped that nugget on them. And again, both of them kind of look perplexed and just move on with the conversation. And later on, Bob Costas joins again. And Bob at the end goes, hey, by the way, Adnan, I got to tell you, you mentioned Get Shorty and Men in Black 3. If there was a different time and era, rather than later with Bob Costas, it'd be later with Adnan Burke. And now I feel like $1 million. Now I'm like, all right. I go home and I get a text message and it says, no joke, I really am a fan, -BC. And I looked at my wife and I go, well, there can be only one BC. So I'm about to faint. I think Bob Costas just sent me a text message. And, they say never meet your heroes. But I got to tell you, Bob Costas is about as generous and genuine as it gets. Since that little interplay, We have had dinner with Ben Mankiewicz. We've had many a phone conversation, many a text message, and it's a wonder to bring in, I believe, the 29-time Emmy Award winner. I may be shorting him at least one. But Bob, it is great to see you. Thank you for your generosity, and I cannot wait to talk movies with you.
What a tremendous introduction that was. But by the way, BC could have been Billy Crystal, could have been Bryan Cranston. Come on. And that's just off the top of my head. There's probably 100 BCs we could think of, BCs of note.
That's a good call. Bryan Cranston just happened to watch MLB Now that day, wanted to pass along a text.
There you go.
That's good stuff.
Both of them huge baseball fans, by the way. Both Crystal and Cranston, huge baseball fans.
And we're going to talk about Billy specifically later on, your friendship with him. But this got me to thinking, too. Let's go right here. Biggest celebrity baseball fans. If I had to give you a Mount Rushmore. So if we said Cranston, Dodgers, Crystal, obviously the Yankees. Jason Bateman, I think, is an avid Dodgers fan. He goes to the game. He scores the games. Yeah. Who is somebody you've met that you go, oh, my God, this guy's as big a fan as it gets?
Well, you got to go this way. You got to give a nod.
Billy Bob Thornton, Cardinals.
Got to give a nod to the Heartland.
Yeah.
John Hamm and John Goodman, huge Cardinal fans.
Yeah.
Right? If we branch out from movies into rock and roll, okay, George Thorogood of the Delaware Destroyers, huge Phillies fan. He's from Newark, Delaware, and Delaware, that part of Delaware is Phillies territory. He actually built a small ballpark in his backyard, which I vowed to visit going back 30 years, and I still never have. He has his own ballpark back there. You know, we're all, not you, but George and I are getting up in age. But when we were 40, 45, somewhere in there, his thing was, come on, we're not playing softball. We're not playing wiffle ball. We're playing hardball, which is how people of a certain age referred to baseball. We're playing hardball.
George Thorogood.
No, he's bad to the bone.
I'm about to say, let's start dropping George Thorogood lyrics. So right now the audience is thinking, you're excited. Feel these nipples. Basketball, which you're fantastic in. And here's the problem. That line, that scene was in the trailer. So there's a legion of people, Bob, who haven't seen the movie, but they just know that line.
That's right.
Do you have any regrets, or was it, hey, it was fun, it was tongue-in-cheek, and if you get it, you're fine?
In retrospect, not only no regrets, I completely embrace it. The movie, you know, is not highbrow, that's for sure. But it has some very funny scenes, and a disproportionate number of them are me and Al. Right. You know, some of which we ad-libbed, some of which was in the script. But if you take it in the right spirit, a lot of it is very funny. But here's a story connected to the trailer. It comes out in 1998. Saving Private Ryan came out at the same time. Mm-hmm. I go with some friends in St. Louis to the Kirkwood Theater, which I don't think exists anymore, suburb of St. Louis. You could get in on a weekday for $1. Okay, $1. All right, first run movies. Okay, so I'm down, you know, maybe halfway down on the right aisle, and the trailers are playing, and on comes the trailer for Baseketball, which includes the Feel These Nipples line. And I try to be inconspicuous in situations like that, and we're in the dark in the theater, but apparently a few people had seen me purchasing my ticket and coming in, and from the back of the darkened theater, after the Feel These Nipples line plays, comes a solitary voice. Bob. Like, Bob, you're our boy. You let us down. You're a classy guy. Come on, you're the host of the Olympics. You're on the series. You're on the NBA Finals. What's the deal, Bob?
Well, there's so much of that was about your relationship with Al, and Al told the story in his book. And this is always dangerous. You know this. Guys are sitting around kibitzing, how much did you make? How much did this? In this instance, finding out how much a guy made almost put the film in jeopardy. In honor of Bad Dog, tell us that.
You know, it's bad form to talk money. We break after the first few scenes. We break for lunch, and we're enjoying ourselves. But then they show us some of the dailies. And the way this worked was Al and I were on the last day of shooting. But we were indispensable because those scenes in the booth tie the whole movie together. So we never saw Yasmin Bleeth. We never saw Ernest Borgnine, Robert Vaughn. We never saw Kareem and Dan Patrick and Reggie Jackson, everybody else that was in the movie. It's just the two of us. And so now they show us the dailies. And Al gets back in the trailer and he goes, this sucks. What have we done to ourselves? And I say just offhandedly, well, at least it's a good payday. And then he looks at me and goes, what do you mean? I said, well, it's not bad. He goes, what do you get? I said, what are you getting? I said, look, let's flip a coin. Whoever loses has to reveal first.
Smart.
So I lose, I reveal. I'm getting 5 times as much as he's getting. Okay. Now, no one's going to have to throw a benefit for Al Michaels in 1998 or now. Yeah. But Al is very competitive. And so he doesn't want me to get a penny more, let alone 5 times more. So he goes nuts, right? And he calls his agent and he says, if you don't get me what Costas is getting, I'm walking off the film. All right. And the first response from the Zucker brothers, who produced the movie, and the reason why I did it, hey, it's the Zucker brothers, Airplane, right. The Naked Gun series. This can't be bad. Basketball is a notch or two beneath the Naked Gun and Airplane, even though it has its moments. Okay. So the first response from the Zucker brothers is, go ahead and walk. You signed a contract. You signed a contract. Then Michaels points out shrewdly, if I walk, you don't have a movie. Yeah, he's right, isn't he? Okay, so now we got to give him the same as Costas, but knowing Al, he has to one-up them. It has nothing to do with me. Yeah. He got an additional 10 grand sort of as punitive damages, So he came out way ahead, and now, now it's a source of, it comes up now and then, and it's a source of great amusement. There's no real embarrassment attached to it. But when you think about it, Al has some lines in this movie, which today, there's no way in the world those lines don't get edited out.
2024, very different environment for the likes of Baseketball. Yeah. How about Pootie Tang? I mean, if ever there was a film, someone said, how is Bob Costas and Pootie Tang? How did this come to be?
Here's how Bob Costas is in Pootie Tang. Chris Rock is the executive producer. He's also in it. He's not Pootie Tang. Lance Crowther is Pootie Tang, and a cast of thousands, which includes the great Wanda Sykes. But Chris Rock calls me. I want you to do this movie. Oh, it's Chris Rock. Of course I'm going to do it, right? So we shoot it in like 45 minutes on the set of my first HBO show. And Pootie Tang is the guest on the HBO show. And it was a little bit like what I take Curb Your Enthusiasm to be. No real script, just a broad outline. And we did 2 takes in the space of 45 minutes. There were 3 segments that I was on. I bookend the film with him. It begins with, he's on the show, and it's sort of like, let's take a look at the clip. And it turns out to be the longest clip in history. It was not that long a movie, maybe 90 minutes, but it's a 90-minute clip. And then we come back at the end and book, that's the longest clip I've ever seen. And in the middle, there's a segment with Wanda Sykes, who played Biggie Shorty. And the whole thing took 45 minutes.
Amazing. By the way, just as an aside, the Curb Your Enthusiasm, the interview you did with Larry David is one of the best I've ever seen, because you at one point listed all the things that he did in the show, and even he's laughing at the ridiculousness of these conceits, like children with big penises, like Milton Berle. Like, what is wrong with you?
Here's the problem. Okay, this is both the upside and the downside of a podcast and the world in which we now live. Yeah. The world in which we now live allows you to send me a Zoom link and we do this show. Mm-hmm. And I'm teetering on the brink here of telling you a great Milton Berle story. But if I do, your audience will appreciate it, but it doesn't stay confined to here. And then vultures and aggregators with no sense of tone, context, or intention, then repurpose it. And it becomes a cause celeb beyond the original intention. So I'm not telling you this Milton Berle story now, but I will when we're not taping.
I was going to say,
it's not a Milton Berle story I heard. I've heard the Milton Berle stories regarding what you just sort of parenthetically alluded to. But this one actually took place on the set of Later.
I cannot wait till this interview is done. I can't wait till this interview is now done just to hear this story. Okay, 1993 Milton Berle. I forgot you were in The Paper, which I've asked people like Jamel Hill. They go, that's my favorite movie. Anybody who's a journalist, are you kidding? The scene where Michael Keaton gets to say, stop the presses, and him and Glenn Close and Robert Duvall. I mean, tell me about The Paper.
Yeah, so Ron Howard and I were acquainted because he was a guest on Later, and he's a huge sports fan. I saw him once or twice at Laker games and whatnot. So he calls me, and it's right around the same time period, 1993, 94, somewhere in there. He says, are you in New York? Yeah, I'm in New York. Do you have a tuxedo? And I said, as it happens, I was at a banquet last night. Yes, I have a tuxedo. He says, good. Be at Radio City at 3:00. Wear the tuxedo. So I show up. I don't know what the scene is. And the scene turns out to be Jason Robards is the editor of the paper. I think the editor, publisher, whatever. He's the bigwig. And Glenn Close has some sort of issue with him. And they're arguing at this big gala, which takes place at Radio City. And Radio City is an old and ornate building, which has one of those old school restrooms where there's an attendant with actual towels, you know, and you tip the guy $1 for giving you the towel. Okay. Yeah. So the scene is that Glenn Close is so absorbed in this argument with Jason Robards, who tries to walk away from her, and she pursues him down each and every hallway, still, you know, haranguing him over whatever her grievance is. And then he walks into this gigantic, ornate, high-ceiling men's room, and she follows him in. Okay? Mm-hmm. So Ron Howard says, we want somebody recognizable who is doing his business, not in the stall, but at the urinal. That's my role. And so I say to him jokingly, what's my motivation? And he goes, your motivation is you're taking a leak. Okay, fine. So the scene is, Robards walks in, she walks in, all of a sudden she slams on the brakes and looks around. Oh my gosh, what am I doing here? And I'm sort of over Robards' shoulder, quickly sort of zipping up and turning away. and he delivers his line, I wish you weren't here. And for whatever reason, blocking or something, they shot it about 5 times. And what was interesting to me was that Jason Robards did it exactly the same all 5 times. Even a trained eye, I don't think could distinguish take 2 from take 4. But Glenn Close put a different wrinkle in it each time. And her best one was when she turned to storm out, because she wasn't going to admit defeat. She turned to storm out, and she reached into the little wicker basket that had the towels, and she hadn't done anything. She grabbed the towel out, she pretended to be wiping her hands, and she tossed it away and walked out. And I think that's the take they kept.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because Tim Kirchen told me this at a Brockmire. He said, I saw like Amanda Peet, like just rip off this insane amount of dialogue, like pages and pages. Right. Hank Azaria, same thing. And yet they couldn't do what we do. Like they couldn't read a teleprompter to save their life. It's insane. Yeah. Like they had the mental acuity and the skills. You said Roberts could do the exact same way, but certain actors, just like broadcasters, can only do certain things. That's really cool. What do Paul Newman and Bob Costas have in common? Both voices in Cars. How incredible is that?
I was the voice of Bob Costas in Cars 1 and 3. And on 1, Paul Newman was a big star. And we happened to do, I think he probably had more voiceover sessions than I did. But on my voiceover session in New York, he happened to be there as well. So we crossed paths and we had a friendly chat. And then later I invited him to be on my HBO show, which was a hybrid between entertainment, show business, films, and sports. And as you know, he had a huge interest in auto racing, to the point where he actually had his own crew and his own cars that he owned. And we went up to Montreal. I forget what the event was. I'm not much of an auto racing guy. But we went and we filmed him at the event. But the big payoff was I had dinner with him. And he could not have been nicer. And he agreed to do an interview. And, you know, he played Rocky Graziano in Somebody Up There Likes Me. And, of course, the Hustler, the billiard scenes. Yeah. So I don't know if there was any other sports stuff, but those 2 things gave us an excuse to kind of do the interview with him and fill out the other parts of it. What a classy and engaging guy.
I was going to say, I would just, if I saw, I would just ask him about the verdict, just pepper him with questions. One of the great performances, right? Alcoholic, down and out lawyer, great Boston movie, mammoth script, Lumet directing, and obviously a great humanitarian as well. All the money he's given away.
You know, by the way, now that you mentioned Cars, I get probably on a weekly basis 5 or 6 requests for autographs, not of pictures of me, but of pictures of the car of Bob Costas. So I sign it, Bob Costas, and then in parentheses, Cutlass. Right. And it's not uncommon for me to be out to dinner, and some youngish couple, you know, in their 30s or whatever, will come up and say, you're in our living room every night. What am I? Well, I don't do as much. it's because they have like a 4-year-old kid. And
Right.
not only do kids, that demographic, like 3 to 6 for those Pixar films, it's not just that they like it, they'll watch it every day. A 4-year-old kid will watch it every day.
Yeah.
So apparently I've been inflicted upon unwitting parents, whether they want it or not.
I thought you were going to say every week you still get the residual check. $19.13 for Cars. I'll take it. Add that to the coffers.
I'll say this about the Pixar people. They were extraordinarily generous.
Yeah.
I was stunned by, there was no negotiation. You just do it because, it's Pixar. Same reason you do it when Ron Howard calls or Chris Rock calls. They were extraordinarily generous up front. So I don't think there were any residuals involved. Al Michaels tells me that he still gets residual checks from Baseketball, and they'll be like, $11.47 or something. And I guess I do too, but they go to someone else who keeps track of that for me.
Yeah, that's good to know. If one people know about you, your passion for baseball and fondness, particularly for Mickey Mantle, and just reverence for him. You had your baseball card in your wallet, and of course, you were there, when he passed away, and obviously overseeing the entire ceremonies. It was beautiful what you had to say about Mickey and his relationship with him. And again, it makes me think about, as I said, for someone to admire someone so deeply and then become a part of their life and to know them, et cetera. And I said, the only other person you can relate to that on that level is Billy Crystal, because Crystal, of course, idolizes the Yankees and idolizes that era and Mickey Mantle as well. How did you and Billy become so close?
I remember getting on an elevator at NBC sometime in the early 80s. And Billy Crystal's on the elevator. And before I can say hello, and I think I'll have to introduce myself, Billy says, "Hi, Bob." And he's such a nice guy, but I was surprised that he recognized me and knew who I was. And we struck up a conversation about baseball and the Yankees and whatnot. And then fast forward to some point in the early 90s. And Billy and I are both staying at the Regency Hotel in New York. And George Steinbrenner had given Mickey a permanent suite, at least during the baseball season, for when he came in and did whatever he did for the Yankees as an ambassador. So we wind up in the bar one night with Mantle, and the place is just about closed down, and we're still swapping stories. And I remember Mickey, I wish I could do his Oklahoma drawl, but at one point he goes, "Shit, I did all this stuff, and I don't remember half of it. But you two little shits remember all of it." So that was his joke, right? But then he subsequently, when he went to the Betty Ford Clinic and got clean, and here's the tragedy of it. He got clean. He was seemingly healthy, new lease on life, new outlook. But then part of the life that he led caught up with him, and the liver cancer did him in barely a year later. But in that period of time, from after he got out of Betty Ford, before he fell ill again, he told me and Billy, a lot of times, especially if I'd been drinking, I didn't like it or understand it when everybody kind of wanted a piece of my time and they wanted an autograph or they wanted a picture. And sometimes I wouldn't go places where I thought I'd be recognized. But you guys put a name and a face to all those thousands of people. You represented those people to me. And it was only after I became friends with you guys that I really understood that these weren't just people bothering me or wanting an autograph that they were going to sell, that I was a piece of their childhood, like I'm a piece of your childhood. He might not have said it quite the way that I'm saying it to you, but it was the same thought, which was very touching. That, obviously he knew he was adored. When they retired his uniform, he got like a 10-minute standing ovation. You know how long a 10-minute standing ovation is at Yankee Stadium? It just wouldn't stop. He knew he was adored. He knew how popular he was in a certain sense, but I don't think he got the poignancy of it and the personal level beyond cheering a home run, that he was a part of so many people's personal biography in one way or another. And when I did his eulogy in Dallas in 1995, I alluded to the fact that that was true of someone whose team was the Yankees. But it was also true if you were a Cub fan and your guy was Ernie Banks, or a Tiger fan and your guy was Al Kaline, or for so many people, Willie Mays. And I think that's why it resonated, because I got so many letters. That was back when people wrote letters. I got like 5,000 letters after Mantle's eulogy. And many of them mentioned this. I was not a Yankee fan. I was, a Cleveland Indian fan. And my guy was Rocky Colavito or whatever. But I got what you were talking about. So there.
No, I remember watching the ESPN Sports Century documentary, and it was so powerful. Pat Summerall says, he goes, Mickey said, if I have another drink, I want you to kill me. Like that. Like, I can't go back to that. And, that speech he gave when he says, God gave me all these gifts and he's like, to all the kids out there, don't be like me. Bob, I thought that was so heroic that he said that. Like, that was unbelievable vulnerability. And it's a clip of you saying, we want our heroes to be a certain way, but they're not. And God knows they're not perfect. But the fact that Mickey was so honest about it, I thought was so courageous.
Yeah, Mickey had a lot of virtues. People want simplistic stories. They want the guy to be some sort of movie hero, a movie that is just hagiographic rather than a movie better made with nuance and shadings. They want their heroes to be that. Or they want to be able to say, oh, it was all a fraud, screw him. Mickey Mantle was a combination of flaws and vulnerabilities, but also tremendous virtues, which were not confined to his God-given baseball ability. All of his teammates attested that he, arguably the biggest star along with Willie Mays of his time, every rookie on the team, he treated as if it was Whitey Ford or, Casey Stengler, Yogi Berra. He was kind and generous. There was something wistful about him. There was a kind of poignancy about him. I think in the eulogy, I said something like, we kids knew there was something poignant about Mickey Mantle even before we knew what poignant meant. There was a kindness in him and a generosity of spirit. Plus, he was very funny. He was a great joke teller, and could get off a witty line. Like most of us, he was a combination of pluses and minuses. It's just in his case, as famous as he was, it was all writ very large.
Yeah, there's no question about it. A couple more and we'll get you out of here. I was talking off and over text, and I said, okay, we'll talk about your favorite movies. And you said, well, favorite movies, it's too vast and we can't possibly encompass that. So the better question, as you phrased it, was movies that stuck with you as a kid. Which movies have resonated for you?
I grew up in New York, and people of a certain age will remember this. There was something on Channel 9, back when most cities, they had 3 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, but there were 3 independent channels in New York, channels 5, 9, and 11, in addition to 13, which was the PBS station. And Channel 9, which carried the Mets when they came into existence, but Channel 9 had something called the $1 Million Movie. And every weekday at 7 p.m., they played the same movie. And then they played it back to back on Saturday and Sunday. So in theory, you could watch the same movie 9 times in a week. Okay. So now I'm 7 years old. So this is what struck me when I'm 7 years old. King Kong, which I'm sure I've seen more than 20 times, the original one from 1933.
Fay Wray.
Fay Wray, which here's something I never understood. Okay. King Kong is holding Fay Wray above the New York streets from the top of the Empire State Building. Now, I realize that there's great peril in being in the ape's giant hand. On the other hand, she's wriggling crazily, trying to get free. What happens if you liberate yourself from the ape's grip? You plunge 100+ stories to your doom. So basically, you should be kind of cuddling up to the ape. Right? But that didn't really occur to her.
Very little favor.
So Jimmy Cagney in Yankee Doodle Dandy. Mm-hmm. And this is what's so strange. I might have been 9 when I latched onto this one. Double Indemnity. Yes. One of the great film noirs. Barbara Stanwyck, Fred McMurray, which struck me as a kid as odd because we knew him then as the star of My Three Sons, which was not even a mid-level sitcom, canned laughter. Never anything really that funny, just bland. But here was Fred McMurray, in black and white with Edward G. Robinson. It was one of the great film noir movies ever. Raymond Chandler, I think Raymond Chandler wrote the screenplay along with Billy Wilder, who directed it. And Raymond Chandler was the king of film noir.
Yeah, what's amazing is people often say greatest scripts ever. You know, Robert Town recently passed away, and people say is Chinatown the greatest script ever.
Yep.
It's a little bit of revisionist history because actually Polanski did a lot of work on the script, wasn't credited with it, directed it, but actually worked on the script a lot. But I'm with you. If someone says to me greatest script ever, I think Double Indemnity is on the Mount Rushmore, a very short list. It is so sharp, Bob, and
Oh my
cynical and
gosh.
acidic and eminently quotable.
Yeah, and all those terse film noir type or Raymond Chandler novel type dialogue and little asides. One that I got when I was like 12 years old. They bring in a guy. It involves a double indemnity insurance claim. There's a murder thing, and Stanwyck and McMurray are lovers, and they want to do in her husband. And the way they decide that they'll do him in is to push him off the back of a train, right? Because it's double indemnity, insurance policies, things that couldn't possibly really happen. You know, you're kidnapped by an ape who throws you off the top of the Empire State Building. Double indemnity for those who are cashing in on the policy. So killed by falling off a train, double indemnity, double a payoff, right? So they bring in some guy who supposedly was on the train. And the guy, Edward G. Robinson, is the kind of grizzled insurance examiner. You know, he knows all the ins and outs. He's not going to fall for any crap, right? And so the witness, he says, Keyes, who's Edward G. Robinson's character, says, "What are you doing?" He says, I'm going to see an osteopath here in town. And this is like 1944, right? And Edward G. Robinson says, "Wow, I hope she's good." Now, there weren't that many female doctors in 1944. Mr. Keyes, I'm a Medford man, Medford, Oregon. I have an osteopath here in New York. The likelihood that he was ever in New York is slim. I have an osteopath here in New York. I'd like to see. Well, I hope she's good. I'm 12 years old. They're slipping this stuff in there.
Edward G. Robinson, unbelievable as Keyes. When he says, you know, I always thought you were a little smarter, but you're not. You're just a little taller. And the times he repeats, he goes, you know how I know? My little man tells me. I mean, it's just indelible lines.
It's fantastic.
Bob Costas, the legend. Last thought for you. It's amazing because when you've had a career, 50 plus years in broadcasting, people can know so many different things. And I think for a lot of those people, it is the Olympics. And my dad was so excited, sent me a picture. Here's your friend, Bob Costas. You and Al Michaels and Mike Tirico rejoined together. I think for a lot of people who are sentimental, it's okay. That's great. We always embody you as a part of the Olympics. You're part of that fabric. How rewarding was it for you to be part of the coverage again?
I don't think I was really part of the coverage. You know, Al and I flanked Tirico, the Eiffel Tower in the background, and the main set for the primetime presentation. And we just offered kind of an overview of what the Olympics has meant to us and what it will mean in the United States when the Olympics come back to Los Angeles in 2028. I think it was more just the idea of being back in the fold. NBC invited us to come to Paris along with our wives and just go to whatever events we wanted to go to and enjoy ourselves. So it was that gesture was very much appreciated. And we didn't even get to Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
Oh, that's right. If you want to squeeze it in, it's up to you. Or we can save it for next time. It's your choice.
Well, it's a podcast. You have an actual out time.
No, we don't.
You do?
See, you're right. There is no out time. I feel bad keeping you long, but you're right. There is no podcast can go for 75 minutes. You're right. Hush, hush, sweet Charlotte. Go ahead.
So, you're talking about what kind of gets you when you're a kid.
Yeah.
I was 13 years old when I saw Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which is directed by Robert Aldridge, who did The Dirty Dozen, among other films. But he had also done Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which is actually more famous than Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Yep. But I think Hush Hush is the better film. And Joan Crawford, who had starred with Bette Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, apparently they wanted her to play the role that eventually went to Olivia de Havilland when there was some contract dispute with Joan Crawford. And, you know, anytime someone aces a role, it's impossible to see anyone else in that role. This film is so great, and it calls upon Bette Davis and Olivia de Havilland to chew up all the scenery, but it's not like they're overdoing it. It's just, it fits.
It's larger than life characters. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And there's so much suspense built up, and it starts early on. A young Bruce Dern, maybe the first film of any consequence he's ever in, he gets murdered in the most grisly way. And it shocks you because you're not expecting it. It comes right at the beginning of the film. And then you also note that Victor Buono, who then was like 26 years old, plays Betty Davis's father. Now, they shoot Betty Davis in 1927 in all kinds of shadows. And then most of the film takes place in 1964 in Louisiana in the mansion where Betty Davis is holed up. She's Sweet Charlotte. She's slowly losing her mind. And now Olivia de Havilland and Joseph Cotten plot to push her completely over the edge so that they can inherit everything. Those are the outlines of the film. But, you know, a story is one thing. And then you have the performances. Then you also have the cinematography. You have all the other elements that go into making something greater than the sum of its parts. This film, I swear, if you told me Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte was on right now, and I was alone someplace, I think I'd still be too frightened to watch it. I think I need armed guards if I'm going to watch Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte again.
I have to mention this because when we had dinner with Ben Mankiewicz, you had a great question to me and Ben. You go, name a director of the 60s and 70s who was not A-list, but was an outstanding guest on Later. And so Ben and I start thinking, they go, not A-list. He goes, but a prominent director. When I hear it, when I say his name, you guys know who he is. I'm like, okay. So I said Sidney Pollack, and Mankiewicz goes, no, but you would know Sidney Pollack would be good. And you said John Frankenheimer. The reason I mention it is I just watched Seconds, which is a film on Criterion Channel with Rock Hudson and Frankenheimer directed. Fantastic film, very unnerving psychological thriller. But if you have an aside on John Frankenheimer, what a good guest he was with you. People, of course, I think know his.
Yeah, he was so well spoken about the films. You know, sometimes people can do something very well, like in sports. You can name a lot of great hitters, but you wanted to hear Ted Williams or Tony Gwynn talk about hitting. You want to hear Jerry Seinfeld deconstruct a comedy routine, why this joke should go before, not after that joke, or why the syllables actually matter and how you set the thing up. They understand and can articulate what it is they do better than those of equal ability might be able to. And Frankenheimer was great in that respect. Some of those laters are knocking around on YouTube. Some guy in Cleveland recorded all of them on his VHS in the late 80s and early 90s. And so I don't know if the Frankenheimer one is out there, but if you Google it, you find out in a minute or two. And my last thought is this, like about Billy Wilder. Think about the range. This guy does
Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity, The Apartment,
Sunset Boulevard, but also Some Like It Hot, right? And the 7-Year Itch, you know, and the Fortune Cookie. I mean, the range of the light comedy to film noir and all points in between. And this guy was a master.
I agree. Underappreciated director, Hungarian immigrant, thick accent, but you're right. He could do it all, whether it's comedies or drama. It was amazing. Harry Krinsky, you get the last thought. This is your chance to ask Bob Costas a question. Harry, you're a huge basketball fan. Bob called games at NBC for a long time. Whatever you want, Harry, you get the final shot here with Bob. What do you got?
Wow.
I got nothing.
No,
there was just a delay there.
I got a question about the podcasting as a medium, because we were talking about this. We were talking about the aggregating, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How has, as somebody who was that mediator between the audience and the stars, how has that changed in your mind now that athletes and players and all of these folks have their own podcasts and their own outlets?
Yeah. Well, they have their own podcast or their own Twitter account or X, whatever it is now, their own Instagram. And so they can get their message out any way they want. Not to drop a name, but I happened to be with Jerry Seinfeld about a month ago. And he mentioned that he thought that Later was a forerunner of podcasts because they were open-ended conversations. And if it's 22 minutes minus the commercials and the hello and goodbye for a half-hour show. But if the guest was good enough, we just keep taping, and it'd be 2 nights in a row, or sometimes even more than that. Paul McCartney was 3 shows, as I remember. But the difference is, to your question, Harry, at that time, the audience was those who saw the show, or now those who might see it on YouTube, where they take the commercials out. Now, somebody might have said, hey, did you see that show the other night when Jerry Seinfeld was on with Bob Costas? They might say that. But you didn't have vultures who were picking it apart and ripping it from its context, even when it's appreciative, almost always there's a clickbait headline that makes a response to a question seem like a grand proclamation that doesn't have the tone of voice or the twinkle in the eye, the offhanded nature of it. It's all lost, either because of haste and carelessness, because of cynicism and deliberate dishonesty, or just because the person doing it doesn't have to clear any bar of credibility or experience or capability. And so you get a huge variety of quality to this stuff. And this is what gives me pause. I mean, anyone who's watching this knows that I love to have these conversations at greater length than television generally allows. But part of the peril is that no matter how good-natured the intention, no matter the value of what you say in its full context, guaranteed that aggregators, some of whom are predators, will just pounce upon it for their own purposes. And then you would think people would pick up on this by now, but people act as if that's the totality of it. And then they respond to it in that way. Just one example, and this is a personal beef. My Hall of Fame speech in 2018 in Cooperstown was an homage to the game and to the craft of broadcasting and to those who I've worked with and those I admired. And so somewhere in the course of that, I made the point of saying, very often in sports, and perhaps especially in baseball, the way we remember the greatest moments is influenced by how they were described by the great broadcasters. And I mentioned Vin Scully and Jack Buck on the same play, Kirk Gibson's home run. Scully's great call, and then Buck on the radio. I don't believe
what I just saw.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, so our friend Jason Stark on his Twitter post said, from Bob Costas's lovely Hall of Fame speech, the way we remember the great moments in baseball is often influenced by those who called it. And I saw it because it was Jason. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen it. And then beneath it, there's comments, many of them appreciative, but some are like, oh, so Costas trying to give himself credit. The whole thing had almost nothing to do with me. It was an homage to the craft, to the game, and to others who have done it well. Now, does that really matter in the big picture of things? No, but it indicates something. If we're all just grains of sand on the beach, a geologist can take that grain of sand and tell you what the beach is like. And moments like that, relatively harmless as they are, tell us about the disinformation and distortion machine that we're living in. That one is relatively benign and inconsequential. But think about our politics. Think about the way people's reputations are shaped or influenced. It's not an honest discussion, sometimes because it's deliberately dishonest and cynical, but other times because it's just sloppy and lazy. And this is where people are getting their information. I heard it somewhere. I saw it on Facebook. Oh, I don't know. I heard it. Many people are saying, who made that phrase famous? Many people are saying, well, that must be true. Many people are saying, I saw it someplace. I saw it online. Oh, yeah, that's fine. No distinction between the guy who won the Pulitzer and the guy who was commenter number 473 or jerk off 602 on his Twitter account.
All of them get equal weight in this toilet bowl of Twitter.
Correct. Yeah. Just as the following. Okay.
Yeah.
That person's vote counts just the same as yours and mine, or as the late great wrestling manager Bobby the Brain Heenan said to me on Later.
Yeah.
Only two things concern me about wrestling fans: they can vote and they can breed. Now what? Now people will say, "Oh, Costas says all wrestling fans." No, it's a joke. It's a joke, Bird Brain. It's a joke. And Bobby the Brain Heenan said it. And like all good jokes, it contains an element of truth.
Okay, since you brought up the wrestling, the interviews with Vince McMahon are unbelievable. And in Jim Miller's exhaustive HBO book, you're quoted on it and discussed it. Well, people have to, I can't do it justice unless you see it. But it was so great, Bob, because it really was like elemental as purest form, because you're smart and funny and learned. And I'm not saying Vince isn't, but he's using his size to his advantage, right? Intimidating, bullying. and you just wouldn't take the bait. And it was amazing seeing it, watching it live, and wondering,
Yeah.
hey, what's artificial, what's wrestling. But I was like, no, it's genuine. These guys are both going at it, so to speak.
And it was live,
Right.
not taped. And because it's HBO, there were no commercial interruptions. And you're right. He was getting very angry. He didn't like the line of questioning, and he's coming forward in his seat. And very often, I think on television, tone rather than content is what wins out. So if you looked at a transcript, Vince isn't dumb. He made reasonably good points and had decent responses to my questions. But by tone, he's losing it, and I'm remaining fairly calm. Now, subsequently, Vince, who in his best moments is very funny, and I give him full credit for his achievements as a businessman and for being a very good performer on his own terms. But Vince has taken to saying, if Bob was bigger, I would have given them some really good television. And my response is, let's test this premise. Let's suppose someone's on Meet the Press. I guess I said this when Chuck Todd was the moderator of Meet the Press. Okay, so the senator from Nebraska, whoever he may be, is on Meet the Press. And hey, he and Chuck are in the same weight class. They each go about 170 to 175. In that case, since it would be a fair fight, if the senator objects to the line of questioning, he should just throw down with Chuck Todd. This is the premise you've laid out there, Vince. I think once again, you have taken yourself into an intellectual cul-de-sac. And I prevail by not doing anything, except letting you say or do something that indicts itself. On the other hand, there are people who actually believe that the merit of it would be decided by who could win a back alley fight. And some of those people are Vince's
the problem of the world, Bob. This is how primitive it gets. If you outclass me, if you outsmart me, I'm just going to go kick your ass in the alley. This is what it comes down to.
Right. And of course, if you outsmart them, that means you're an elitist. Right. Because, actually knowing stuff, actually having read books, actually being able to express yourself cogently, that makes you an elitist. Don't you want to be a regular guy, Adnan? Don't you want to forget all that stuff you've learned about movies and about sports and all the books you've read and your appreciation of language? Do you want to be an elitist? Stop before it's too late. By the way, Vince McMahon goes charging out of the studio, slams the door behind him. And studio doors are heavy. It's not like your screen door at your house. Studio doors are heavy. You've got to have a lot of strength to slam a studio door. And there's only like a 30-second bumper of what's coming up next week between me and the next guest. And for me to move to one part of the set to the other.
Well, that was fun. Come up next, Joe Piscopo on his latest film.
Incorrect. The next guest, Bob Knight. So I sit down, I say, Coach, this is the one time in your life when your presence will lower the temperature in the room.
Perfect.
There you have it.
Bobby Knight. We're not going to beat that. The great Bob Costas, of course, you can see him on MLB Network. He's my friend and my colleague. You can see him on TBS, calling games with Ron Darling. He's on CNN as well, opining. And I'm just so glad we got to talk movies, Bob. Obviously, you've been such a great friend to me and somebody who I deeply respect, and a lot of great laughter as well. Hush, hush, sweet Charlotte. I'm glad we got it done.
Scares the bejesus out of you.
All right, thanks once again to Bob Costas, the legend. That was unbelievable. Let's talk about a couple of movies here, including Barney's version. For those watching on YouTube, by the way, please do subscribe on YouTube. Barney's version. This is a great Paul Giamatti film. Giamatti won the Golden Globe for this movie for Best Actor in a Lead Role. Now, it should be noted, his competition that year was incredibly weak. Like, I looked this up because I'm like, I love this movie and Giamatti's awesome. And then I saw the competition and I go, if he hadn't won, there should have been an inquiry into the Golden Globes as to what the hell they were thinking. But regardless, Barney's version is a movie. When I met Giamatti at the Critics' Choice Awards, this was earlier this year in January, when I met, literally the first words out of my mouth, what happened was I was waiting to talk to him, and then the woman kept blabbing because she was some animator, and Giamatti was being very generous. He's like, no, I love animation. Of course, I did American Splendor. I wanted to be an animator at one point in my career. Blah, blah, blah. Woman just won't shut up. And eventually she wants a selfie, and it's so awkward. I go, I'll take the picture for her. She says, okay, great. I take the picture. Then I slide in and go, well, can you get a picture with me? I haven't even met you. I hand it around. I'm like, one side. He's like, yeah, picture. And I go, hey, Barney's version. I go, how great is that movie? And he's like, oh my God, it's fucking great. Because no one ever talks to me about it. And he goes, you must be Canadian. I go, yeah. He goes, the only people that talk about me are Canadians and Italians. Because here's why. The story of the politically incorrect life of Barney Panofsky, who meets the love of his life at his wedding, and she is not the bride. A candid confessional told from Barney's point of view. The film spans 3 decades and 2 continents, taking us through the different acts of his unusual history. There's his first wife, a flagrantly unfaithful free spirit, his second wife, a wealthy Jewish princess, and his third wife, Miriam, the mother of his 2 children and his true love. With his father, Izzy, Dustin Hoffman, as his sidekick, Barney takes us through his long and gloriously full life, played on a grand scale, based on Mordecai Richler's Giller Prize-winning bestseller. So, for those who aren't aware, Mordecai Richler is a very famous Canadian author. He is as Montreal as it gets, so that's why Giamatti knew that I was Canadian. And the movie was shot primarily in Montreal, which is one of the things I loved about Giamatti's speech. When he wins, and you got to look this up because I can't do it justice. When he won it, the first thing he kept saying was Halle Berry because she presented the awards like Halle Berry. Wow, like man, Halle Berry, like, oh, and she's like, yeah, okay. And then he thanks the fellow actors who I'm going to get the nominees who he beat because honestly, it's a ridiculously horrible list. Do you have that? Do you have it to Harry?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, so you look it up while I do this. So in his speech, though, he said, I want to thank the great city of Montreal, one of my favorite cities in the world, and the great people of Canada for being so welcoming. And I told him when I met him, I go, buddy, you know how inferior Canadians are? Like, you give us one compliment, we're friends for life. So I said, the fact that you gave, I'll never forget the Golden Globe speech. And he said, it's true. I adore Montreal and I adore Canada. It's a great country and I love making that movie, etc. Part of the reason why the movie is so great is because it allows Giamatti such range. In this movie, he goes from 20 to 70. So this is catnip for an actor of his range and his talent that he can show all those different beats. And the character of Barney is fairly unlikable. Like, he is just this cigar smoking, Montreal Canadian loving, drink swilling guy who cannot stay in a relationship. And yet he's madly in love. And particularly the relationship with Miriam, played by Rosamund Pike, is amazing. Minnie Driver's the one who is the second wife, who's actually really funny. And Dustin Hoffman's fantastic. I watched the featurette because I have the DVD, and Hoffman said Giamatti wrote him a letter or called him or who knows, emailed him, and just said, I'm a huge fan. You want to play my dad in this movie? He's like, oh my God, yeah. He's like, I'm a big fan of yours too. So as a movie at times, John Emma, my friend, texted me. It's a little bit disjointed. It's a little bit long, maybe about 10, 15 minutes too long. But I loved it for Giamatti's performance because he really balances comedy and drama, and it really nails the tone of a Mordecai Richler story. Go ahead, Harry. Who did he win the Golden Globe against?
Yeah, so he's got Alice in Wonderland, The Tourist, Love and Other Drugs, and Casino Jack. And so it's Jack Abramoff in Casino Jack, Jamie Randall in Love and Other Drugs, Frank to
Those are the characters. Yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal. I was gonna say, yeah.
Spacey.
And Johnny Depp was in.
Like, as I'm reading this, I'm like, who the fuck are these actors? Kevin
it was
Spacey
Johnny Depp
and Casino Jack, Gyllenhaal, and then Johnny Depp. Yeah.
Think about that. Johnny Depp got nominated for a Golden Globe for The Tourist. Of course, Giamatti beat him. Gyllenhaal, Love and Other Drugs, which is a fun little romantic drama, comedy.
I like that movie, yeah.
It's got some good moments. Ed Zwick directed. Anne Hathaway's good. Spacey's nominated for Kangaroo Jack. Are you kidding? And who was the fourth one?
That's it. It's 2 Johnny Depp movies.
Johnny Depp also got nominated for Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. God. That might be the worst. I looked it up and I go, hey, Giamatti won a Golden Globe. And I'm like, thank God he did. That's the worst nominees I've ever heard in my life. Of course he should have won two Golden Globes for that performance. Here's some of the great lines in the movie. At one point, Scott Speedman, who's one of those guys who's a really good-looking Canadian actor. I think he was in Felicity. Go ahead and Google it here. You've definitely seen who Scott Speedman is. If you look him up, you'll see him. But I always thought that like he should have been a bigger star. To me, he was like the Canadian Brad Pitt. Great flow, good-looking dude. Like he's definitely been in some stuff. But I'm like, man, this guy's awesome.
The Canadian Brad Pitt. I like that.
Dude, he's unbelievable. If I ever meet this guy one day, I'm like, you should have had a much bigger career. Like, you are very handsome and a good actor. Anyways, he plays Giamatti's best friend in the movie. At one point, he's talking about doing a story, and he goes, I'm working on a play called Vanessa's Pussy. And Giamatti goes, what's it about? He goes, it's the book of Job seen through Vanessa's lips. And he said, good luck with that. Later on, Hoffman is having dinner at one of the bride's families. He goes, the chicken is great. And they go, it's fish. He goes, no shit. At one point,
that's pretty good.
At one point, Giamatti's so horny. He goes, I got a heart on the size of a can of hairspray. Later at the second wedding, the father-in-law says to him, like, your father has to leave. Like, no more booze for you, blah, blah. He goes, he traumatized the rabbi's wife. And Giamatti's response is, I don't care if he fingered her under the goddamn table. He's my father. He can do what he wants.
Sounds good. Sounds like Ari Gold.
Oh, yeah, it is like Ari Gold. At one point, Minnie Driver's about to go down on him and give him a BJ. And she goes, did you wash it like I asked? And Giamatti's had to give that nod. And she goes, with soap? And he's like, yes. She's like, okay. And then goes to her business. Later on, she says, you can be sure my landing strip will always be clean for you. And Hoffman, when he's telling him not to leave one of these wives, says, this is a Winnie Driver, his second wife. He ends up leaving. He says, don't leave her. He goes, why? He goes, she's a well-bred woman who is loaded, has a beautiful rack. Many successful marriages have been built on far less.
All right, I got to check this out.
I'll tell you, man, Barney's version, really funny, really charming. And again, a gigantic performance from Giamatti. I mean, there's one scene later on when the character's fighting mental illness and he can't remember his wife's number. It is outstanding acting by him and really strong drama. All right, let's squeeze in Being John Malkovich, 25th anniversary. One of the weirdest, craziest movies you'll ever see in your life, and I love it. Have you ever wanted to be someone else? Or more specifically, have you ever wanted to crawl through a portal hidden in an anonymous office building and thereby enter the cerebral cortex of John Malkovich for 15 minutes before being spat out the side of the New Jersey Turnpike? Then director Spike Jonze and writer Charlie Kaufman have the movie for you. Melancholy marionettes, office drudgery, a frizzy-haired Cameron Diaz, but that's not all. Surrealism, possession, John Cusack, a domesticated primate, Freud, Catherine Keener, non sequiturs, and absolutely no romance. But wait, get your Being John Malkovich now. We'll throw in emasculation, slapstick, Abelard and Heloise, and extra Malkovich. That's one of the funniest plot synopses I've ever seen on the back of the DVD.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? Criterion getting it done here with Being John Malkovich. Harry, it's an insane movie. I couldn't imagine telling somebody right now to go watch this film, 25th anniversary. Everything about it is so original, so vibrant, and just so crazy.
It really is. And it is one of those movies where scenes just stick with you. Like I probably watched this movie 7 years ago, just at my house one day. And the image of them in the small office that's for some inexplicable reason, like the ceilings are really low and everybody's hunched over, is like seared into my head. That I don't remember why it's like that. I don't remember what I felt like watching it, but I just am like, that is in my head. Malkovich in the dress, obviously.
Oh. Watching it again, you're right. There's so many different moments. So the elevator, the first thing, you got to go to the 7.5th floor. They're like, okay. And by the way, it's Octavia Spencer who's in the elevator. I'm like, oh my God, future Academy Award winner there with Cusack. And he's like, what? She goes, it's okay. They press 7 and 8, and then she jams the thing door and then uses this crane to open it. He goes, there you go. And so the whole time they're just hunched down. And then he meets the secretary of the woman he's trying to meet to get the job. And she can't understand what he's saying. He's like, Mr. Schwartz. Like, Schwartz says, what did you say to me? He's like, God, what? No, I didn't say that. So she's crazy. Then he meets the prospective boss. And he's like, oh my God, I have this horrible issue. He's like, what's that? He's like, no one can understand what I'm saying. I have the speech impediment. He's like, no, sir, I understand you're perfectly fine. He's like, okay, you're just being sweet. Thanks. Meantime, it's the secretary's crazy. And Cusack's character, by the way, is a puppeteer. Who makes a movie but a puppeteer, for God's sakes? But that's the character, long, stringy hair. Like, this is a guy who was good looking. I mean, listen, John Cusack, handsome guy, say anything. Come on. High fidelity. Here they make him look like just this drab guy living with Cameron Diaz, again, frizzy haired. They just look miserable. And here he is, but he's got these nimble fingers because he's a puppeteer. So he gets this job as far as, filing is concerned. Catherine Keener, he's madly in love with, and she's hysterical in the movie. I mean, she's just
so
cold,
good,
mean-spirited. Like, she's awesome in this film. And she goes out on a date with him, and she goes, what do you do? He goes, I'm a puppeteer. She's like, check, please. Like, right away. Like, no, she's like, I got no interest in you. See you, buddy. He's like, you like to play with dolls. You're not a real grown-up. But the scene when they first find out the portal that it goes into John Malkovich is just, again, I can't think of anything more inspired or more original. And the idea of being in there for 15 minutes and being able to manipulate John Malkovich, and then you get spit out in the New Jersey Turnpike and you want to go back there and do it again. It's amazing. And Cameron Diaz, again, she announces that she's actually a transsexual. And Cusack's like, what? She's like, I'm in love with Catherine Keener character, so I want to go into Malkovich and then be with her. And so Cusack and Diaz are both fighting to be John Malkovich because then they can be with Catherine Keener. And Malkovich himself feels that he's being possessed by some sort of different spirit. Something's happening. He doesn't know what it is, though. And eventually, when he discovers the portal, he wants to go in. This is about as mind-bendingly crazy as it gets, because then everything is Malkovich, including, as you said, a John Malkovich in a dress. There's like 50 John Malkoviches. Malkovich. It's just insane. Like, how do you guys think of these things? And on the Criterion DVD, there's an excellent interview with John Malkovich. And he says, when I got the script sent to me, because I was flying back from doing a movie, and I said to my agent, anything to read? Because I had like a long 5-hour flight. And he goes, I got something crazy for you. He goes, okay. And I start reading it, and I was like, it's just so bizarre and so crazy. He goes, but I liked it. And I said, tell you what, if you change the title, I'd be happy to produce it, like make it about somebody else, and then, kind of go from there. And the word we got back from Charlie Kaufman was like, absolutely not. Like, it has to be Being John. It has to be you. And Malcolm's like, I thought it was just about celebrities in general. I just happened to pick me. So no, it's about you. You're the guy. So either you do it or we're not doing it. And he was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to do it then. I'm fine. Okay, great. We'll figure it out. This eventually got spit around a little bit. And then I eventually had lunch with Charlie Kaufman. And I said, you and Spike Jonze, at this point, he met him as well. And he goes, you guys are really funny, but you're mean. Like there's a real meanness to the humor. Like it's really insulting. Like it's got this bite to it. I don't know if it's necessarily for me. And Charlie's like, well, I'm not changing a word. He goes, again, he was uncompromising because this is the way it is. And this is what it's about. And he goes, afterwards, when it was done, he said, Charlie Kaufman said to him, well, it was great meeting you. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a really big fan. And Malkovich laughed. It was like, you wrote a movie called Being John Malkovich. Like, I can tell you're a fan of mine. Like, I got that part. We're good there. And he said, at the same time, once I agreed to be a part of it, I was totally all in. And he goes, again, the humor is taunting and at times cruel. There's one scene after Malkovich goes through his own portal where the guy's like, hey, Malkovich, think fast, and throws the beer can in his head and hits him. Like, that's in the trailer. And he's like, his character is getting put upon and being insulted, but he was like, I get it. He goes, what they were trying to show is just celebrity culture. And he goes, ultimately, I think what the movie is about, what really the message is, be comfortable with who you are. Because when you try to be someone else, it's not as much as it's cracked up to be. He goes, but I don't think anyone follows that rule because everybody is always fanciful and has wishful thinking and wishes they could be someone else and be in someone else's shoes, particularly a celebrity. But he goes, I think that's the message of the movie, at least as I took it. But it's just wacky as hell, man. I mean, there's the John Horatio Malkovich dance of despair and disillusionment is insane. An intimate portrait of the art of puppeteering. Again, this is one of those movies that they don't make them like they used to. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch this tomorrow. One of my all-time favorites, absolute original, Being John Malkovich, directed by Spike Jonze. Real quick, because Harry's got to run. Black Narcissus is on Criterion, Powell and Pressburger film. If you remember, I talked about a Scorsese documentary earlier this summer, the movies of Powell and Pressburger. Who doesn't want to see a movie about a horny nun? Okay, that's what it's about. Let's be honest. A lot of it is done with figurines and matte paintings, etc. But it's about a nun who wants to leave the covenant because she falls in love with another man. So have at it. Black Narcissus is on Criterion. It's a really good film. Again, if you enjoy Powell and Pressburger, as I have been enjoying The Red Shoes and some of their other films, like The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, it's one film to check out, and definitely I would enjoy it. 3 Maple Leafs. Very sinister finale. It gets kind of unnerving, very Hitchcockian in terms of what happens to the nun and those surrounding her. But ultimately, this was a really fun cinephile episode. Please go to Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe, rate, and review. We reviewed 6 movies, I believe. Harry, do you have time for Paris, Texas? Do you want to shelve it till next week? Your choice.
Let me give you let me tell you this story because it's
oh, you want to tell the story? I was just saying, give me the tease, and then tell me the story next week.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'll do that. Actually, that's a good one. Okay. Here's the tease. I went on a date last night and I saw Paris, Texas.
I can't wait.
I'll tell you guys in a few weeks. It's going
to be great. Harry Krinsky's date and Paris, Texas. Wim Wenders' film is the backdrop to it. I cannot wait for the resolution of this. Last thought. Your thoughts on Bob Costas. Again, you're younger than I am. It's a different generation. But Bob, living legend here on Cinephile.
I asked him this question at the end because it was on my mind. For somebody, generally, I think that if you have been a celebrity for a really long time, you can lose track of what people's relationship with celebrity is because it changes so much. And you were on TV and now you're on Twitter and now you're on whatever. I was really struck by Costas isn't like that. Costas seems to have a really keen and thoughtful understanding of like who he is as a kind of celebrity, who he is as a journalist, who he is as a public figure, how that's all changed over time. Like it was that was the thing, maybe as a producer, somebody who thinks a little bit like this, that was the thing that I was most struck by Bob.
That's pretty cool. That's a genuine compliment. I'll tell him. In fact, he's self-aware of who he is and what he represents and how it's changed over the years. That's cool.
And just super thoughtful about it. Like, clearly has done a lot of thinking about it, and I always appreciate that.
It was awesome. I appreciate not only Harry Krinsky, but all of you, this wonderful audience here in Cinephile. Coming up next week or a week after the hell it is, The People versus Larry Flint. I never seen it. I finally watched it. Woody Harrelson playing Larry Flint, Hustler Magazine, Courtney Love, and Ed Wood in honor of Tim Burton, 30th anniversary of the film that Tim Burton calls his most personal movie. As far as new movies are concerned, we'll figure it out. Harry's going to watch the second part of Wise Guy. We'll talk about that, plus the payoff to the date in Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas. I'll see you at the movies.